Okay, that was testimony from Amy Mason, the former girlfriend of James Colley. They were dating at the time of the murder. She told about their relationship, about how things were going leading up to the day of the murders, August 27th, 2015. I'm joined by Gary Gerstenfield, criminal defense attorney, via Skype right now. And Gary, we've been talking about the verdict. It came in just before lunch. The jury deliberated 2 hours before convicting James Colley of first-degree murder for both Amanda Colley and Linda Dobbins, as well as attempted first-degree murder for the other victims who were in the house, and a number of other lesser charges. Your reaction to the verdict, Gary?
Well, you know, whenever a jury comes back on a case as serious as this in 2 hours, what it basically means is the defense did not hold water at all. It basically is it's a stunning win for the prosecution when with such serious charges and the verdict so quick. It basically says that whatever defense arguments you had, it just didn't work out at all.
Yeah, I mean, the defense, did not, their case was rather short. We know James Colley did not testify. They originally planned to use this involuntary intoxication defense, claiming that he had been on Ambien, but they abandoned that. Do you think that was a good idea, or maybe would that have saved him from a conviction? What do you think?
If only Florida law allowed it. There's a specific statute in Florida which specifically prohibits the use of voluntary intoxication, whether it be alcohol or drugs, as a defense. There's one exception, and that exception is if it's prescribed medication, but that's not the case here, even though it was Ambien.
Right, it was Ambien. I mean, the defense also said, although they abandoned that as their main line of defense, they repeatedly talked about how James Colley was very depressed, taking a number of medications, had anxiety, trouble sleeping. I mean, was that an attempt to get sympathy from the jury? Was it an attempt to, convince jurors just that he was not in the right state of mind? I mean, they aren't arguing that he was insane.
Well, there's always the D, none of the above, and E, all of the above. I'm going to go with E, all of the above. The defense had a tough case. So, basically you just throw out everything that you can, or everything the judge will let you get away with. So you try to throw out the fact that he's got mental issues, but, your Florida law also doesn't allow you to argue if you haven't made a specific plea for insanity, for example. You can't argue that he's crazy to the jury. So you can kind of walk up to that line trying to mitigate. But mitigation in a murder case, I mean, that's tough something to sell.
Yeah. Gary, thanks for your analysis on that. We're going to go back now to hear a little bit more of what Amy Mason, James Colley's ex-girlfriend and girlfriend at the time of the murders, had to say. That's some more of Amy Mason on the stand in James Colley's murder trial. She was his girlfriend at the time of these murders back on August 27th, 2015. Amy Mason just testifying how the night before and the day of the murders, she was texting back and forth with James Colley. He was texting her, I love you. He was repeatedly staying in contact with her while also trying to get in touch with his estranged wife, also going to her house with a gun. So Gary Gerstenfield, criminal defense attorney, is still with me via Skype. Oh, can we make anything of her testimony? I mean, is it a big deal at all that while, he was stalking his estranged wife, perhaps planning to go to her house and look for either her or her new boyfriend with a gun, he's continuing to text with the current girlfriend? They've even talked about getting married, she said. Does that play any part here? Can we make anything of that?
You think that if you're moving on, why are you still, what's this compulsion you have with the first one when you have a new one? It's confusing. I'm not sure you can make a whole lot of that. Typically, when people have a new girlfriend or somebody else in their life, they're able to let go of the last one. So it's a little perplexing. Yeah. I'm not sure we can make much more of it than that.
Hey, I'm with you, Gary. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, much more analysis of the James Colley guilty verdict. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Law and Crime Trial Network. We just heard from Lisa Fine. She is one of the victims of the mass shooting in Las Vegas last October that took place outside the Mandalay Bay Hotel when the gunman shot out of a window, killing 58 people, injuring hundreds more. Lisa, among the victims and among the people in general who are outraged today after MGM Resorts, which owns the Mandalay Bay Hotel, yesterday filed a lawsuit suing the victims of the shooting. Now, the lawsuit lawsuit is not asking the victims for money. It's not asking them to cover attorney fees, but the lawsuit is trying to basically release them of any liability in this shooting. Let's talk a little bit about this, explain their lawsuit, what this all means. I have Gary Gerstenfield still with us here, criminal defense attorney, joining me via Skype. So, Gary, first of all, a lot of people were surprised by this because this is a really unusual move. In fact, according to the New York Times and other published reports, the attorneys for MGM just came up with this idea, this theory themselves a couple of weeks ago to sue.
No, they did not. Absolutely not. So this goes back to 9/11. It goes back to the idea that you can actually purchase a get-out-of-court insurance policy, and that's exactly what the MGM Resort International stockholders are hoping is exactly what they got. So let me explain. After 9/11, it became very clear that there was potential for multi-million-dollar lawsuits for other acts of terrorism that might happen around this country, exposing large corporations to years and years of lawsuits in multiple states and multiple locations. And so as a result of that, effort was placed on Congress to pass a law. And the law is called the Safety Act, which certainly has a good name. It's safety is a good thing. What the Safety Act does is it basically gives an insurance policy to corporations. And here's how it works. You have to be approved by the Homeland Security. You get approved, you sort of get a certificate that says that you are a qualified service provider. And that's exactly what happened in this case. Specifically, the company,
the security company that they hired got the approval.
Right, right. Contemporary Services Corporation, CSC, is certified by the DHS, Department of Homeland Security, and they have a certificate. That certificate says that that they are approved to provide security services, and they did. They provide security services to MGM Resorts International, specifically to Mandalay Bay. Okay, no question about that. What that insurance policy, or what the Safety Act says, is that you have your exclusive remedy if you're the victim of terrorism and this company that has this certificate is in place, and all that seems to be the case here, your sole remedy is to sue that company. So downstream, which in this case happens to be MGM Resorts International, they're downstream, they're the buyer. They get to say, hey, you can't sue us. You can only sue CSC. Well, who is CSC and how much money they got? How deep are their pockets?
Right.
A lot less, obviously, than MGM. And that's exactly what they're arguing in what's called a declaratory action. What is that? Well, they've gone into federal court. That is MGM Resorts International. They've gone into federal court, and they said, look, we want a declaratory action, an order from this court, basically saying that we're right, that, hey, your sole remedy, all these victims, Lisa Fine and
right.
everybody, organization, the 1,000 people that have been sued so far, these people's sole exclusive remedy is in compliance, or is limited to what's provided under the Safety Act.
But Gary, right, in order for their lawsuit to succeed, that hinges on the idea that this was an act of terrorism, right? Because the Safety Act is supposed to apply in the aftermath of a terror attack, right?
Right.
Now, a terror attack, you know, is defined as an attack, you know, as an incident where many people are hurt. I'm looking for the exact definition here, but you know, is it going to be tough for a judge to decide whether or not this was an act of terrorism? Because you have people saying, well, look, this is homegrown terrorism. You know, you don't have to have some kind of, you know, anti-American ideology to do something like this.
Well, we don't know his ideology because he's dead, and we never really got a taste of it. So the biggest problem in terrorism and the biggest problem in fighting terrorism is the idea of this lone wolf, and that's exactly what we have in this case, an individual acting on his own. There's no conspiracy, there's no infiltration that the police or law enforcement can possibly do. A lone wolf is the scariest person, or is the scariest thing, because they're acting alone, and you don't know it till it happens. Now, you're right. The question is, does this constitute terrorism? Well, remember now, the whole purpose of this thing, as I said in the beginning, was to purchase a get-out-of-court insurance policy. That's what MGM folks are relying on. And I think ultimately, I think that as much as I personally hate the idea that you can just buy your way out of court. I think they've got a good footing to make that argument.
Okay, so that's what I was going to ask you. Do you think they'll be successful? Because this is pretty unprecedented. Not many others have tried to do this. So a lot of people have different opinions about whether or not they'll be successful. You think maybe it's a good strategy?
Well, let me put it this way. The alternative is death by 1,000 cuts. See, right now, everybody's filing lawsuits in state courts all over the country. This litigation can go on for years and years and years. If class action lawsuits in different jurisdictions that are maybe very much more plaintiff-friendly, victim-friendly, in other words, this is a business decision on the part of MGM Resorts International. Obviously, they're getting a lot of very ugly publicity as a result of that. But I guess the math for them is pay for it now and not have to pay for it later.
Yeah. All right. Well, we will be following this as it develops. In the meantime, we want to go back to the James Colley murder case. He was convicted 2 counts of first-degree murder earlier today. We've been revisiting some of the key testimony in that case, so let's go back into the courtroom now and hear more from Detective David Causey, a digital forensics examiner. Welcome back to Law and Crime Trial Network. We are continuing to talk about the verdict in the James Colley case. He was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder today, killing his estranged wife Amanda and her good friend Lindy Dobbins back in August of 2015. But first, we want to take a quick break to go over today's top crime stories.
Here are today's top crime stories trending on lawandcrime.com and across the country. A woman in New York is facing federal narcotics charges after she allegedly tried to smuggle nearly 10 pounds of heroin stashed in containers made to look like cooked chickens. Emma Soriano was arrested at JFK Airport when baggage inspectors discovered the drugs valued at $300,000 in her luggage after arriving on a flight from Mexico City. The case was turned over to Homeland Security. A death row inmate executed last night for the fatal shooting of a store owner in San Antonio, Texas, reportedly told the victim's family he loved them before receiving the lethal injection. 34-year-old Christopher Young was convicted of the November 2004 fatal shooting of 53-year-old Hashmukh Patel during an attempted robbery and was sentenced to death. After exhausting his appeals, Young's attorneys sued the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles after they rejected his plea for clemency, saying the rejection was racially motivated. A federal judge dismissed the lawsuit, and the execution went on as scheduled. Body camera footage was released showing officers in Graham, Texas, using a stun gun on an autistic teenager in what some critics are calling an improper use of force. The teen, 19-year-old Michael Moore, was reportedly throwing rocks into a neighbor's yard before this altercation with police.
All right, do me a favor. Put your hands behind your back real quick. I'm sorry. Put your hands behind your back. I'm sorry. Put your hands behind your back. Now! You're about to get tased. Put your hands behind your back.
Moore was tased twice before being brought home to his mother by the officers. The officers were cleared of any wrongdoing by an internal investigation. Those were today's top crime stories. I'm Anthony Velez for Law and Crime.
Thanks for that, Anthony. Well, Gary Gerstenfield, criminal defense attorney, with us via Skype from Maryland. So, Gary, what's your thought? Was that an improper use of force on the part of those officers in Texas?
Probably. Yeah, I mean, the taser, you know, don't tase me, bro. The taser's a popular tool, and in many jurisdictions, many police agencies now have taken away the taser because of complaints. So, you know, the kid's autistic and he's not responding as quickly as the officers would like, and then they tase him.
Now, presumably the officers did not know he was autistic. Let's just review a few of the details of this case here. A homeowner called 911 because the teen, Michael Moore, was allegedly throwing rocks into their yard. But when that homeowner called 911, she said something to the effect of, you know, but I don't know if he's all there. That was not passed along to the officers, and she had also told the 911 dispatcher, please have the officers come talk to me before they approach the teen. They didn't. So is that the dispatcher's fault then? You know, this is key information that should have gone to the officers in this case, because how are they supposed to know that he was autistic?
So police officers get the call, and they run right to the problem without stopping first to get all the information. That seems to be the I think, striking criticism here. And that is, talk to the homeowner, get more information. Throwing rocks or causing a disturbance is not exactly something that should get high priority anyways. So this isn't exactly the crime of the century, and it certainly didn't require the police to give immediate direct action. They could have talked to the homeowner. They chose not to do that. Cops
right. I mean, it's not like the teen was armed or was even, really resisting. Hard to say because the camera kind of drops at that point. Would the teen's family have a case if they wanted to turn around and sue the police department? I mean, I would think this teen, with autism, they're very sensitive to touch. A lot of people with autism, that he was pretty shooken up from this and experienced some real trauma probably afterwards.
Right. So in our last piece, we talked about how MGM Resorts purchased this get-out-of-court insurance policy. Police departments have limited immunity or qualified immunity, and that would probably prohibit any kind of a successful lawsuit against the police or against the agency for what happened.
Really? Even though police departments are sued all the time, for alleged improper use of force?
Well, they've got a burden. The plaintiff has a burden they have to get over first. Even when you bring these lawsuits against agencies or against police or the counties, the majority of them are unsuccessful.
Interesting. All right, well, we will definitely keep an eye on that one. So thanks for your insight there, Gary. Moving on, we're going to go back to talking about the big trial we've been following all week. That's the James Colley murder trial out of Florida. James Colley, convicted this morning of first-degree murder, killing his estranged wife, Amanda Colley, and her best friend, Lindy Dobbins, was back on August 27, 2015, when he showed up at Amanda's house. He was angry. He had been in court earlier that day for violating a restraining order against Amanda. There you see a picture of the couple in happier times, and that there is Lindy Dobbins, Amanda's good friend, who was also killed. Well, prosecutors were able to prove their case. The jury bought it that he did this on purpose. He was so angry that Amanda had moved on, that she had a new boyfriend, that he went to the house angry with a gun. He killed her and her best friend. So what comes next here? Well, that is the sentencing phase, because this is a death penalty case. So we've got lots to talk about in terms of whether or not the defense attorneys will be able to save James Colley from getting the death sentence. That sentencing phase is going to begin on Friday. But first, we want to go back to some more key testimony that we heard over the course of this trial. So right now, let's listen to Kyle Bedron. He's the defendant's attorney, and he was arguing here for an injunction order. So there we saw some surveillance video of James Colley entering court that morning of the murders, when he was in court about violating a restraining order against his estranged wife, Amanda Colley. Gary Gerstenfield, criminal defense attorney, still with me via Skype. Gary, we were talking, the defense did not put on a huge case here. In fact, they abandoned their original argument, the strategy they were going to take to argue that he had been on Ambien and that caused him to commit the murders. And James, along with his attorneys, opted that he would not take the stand. What do you make of that? Was that the right move, or do you think it might have helped his case to testify?
Well, I think at some level, you always think, okay, first thing is he going to be found guilty or not guilty? The evidence was overwhelming. So he was going to be found guilty of first-degree murder. All the elements for premeditation are absolutely here in this case. It is wrenching. This guy was laying in wait. He wanted to kill his wife. And he executed his plan. So that issue was not big. The bigger question is, put him on the stand now. Well, the problem is you might curry favor by showing him as being sympathetic and by being apologetic and trying to be nice. The problem is he's going to be cross-examined, and he's going to be cross-examined about all the crazy stuff he was doing, the conversations with his girlfriend at the same time, the violation of the protective order, and again, the murder itself, all that taking away any sympathy that he might try to get with the jury.
So it sounds like, in your opinion at least, there may be more cons than pros to taking the stand. So do you agree with his decision to sit it out?
I agree with his lawyer's decision to keep him off the stand.
Right.
Yeah, I think it was the right move for his lawyer.
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, there would be a lot that they could bring up here. Why did he go to the house the night before and all that? I think it would have certainly been interesting to see, for us observers. It would have been nice to have that bit of courtroom drama. But in any event, let's move on and talk now a little bit about the sentencing phase and what will come next. That is going to get underway on Friday morning. So what can we expect, right? We know this is when attorneys from both sides are going to make their case for why Colley should or should not get the death penalty.
Yeah, for the defense, this is the biggest part right now. It's emotional at this point because now you're trying to save the life of somebody who's been just convicted of really outrageous act and 2 dead people. So, and this is Florida. I mean, Florida and Texas, they're competing. It's a death penalty case, and he stands a good chance of getting the death penalty. It's going to be a very emotional thing for the I'm glad I'm not his attorney in this case. Boy, is that tough. It's going to be tough Friday and that weekend. It's going to be tough trying to keep that guy alive.
Do you think that we're going to hear from a lot of the same witnesses that we heard from, including the surviving witnesses, James Colley's sisters, in the case of the defense? Do you expect we'll hear a lot of the same, or could we hear some different testimony?
I think we're going to hear from them and more, because now it's not a fact issue anymore about trying to prove a murder. Now you're trying to show who this person is and why he deserves the death penalty from the state's point of view. And of course, from the defense point of view, trying to show why this is a person worthy of life without parole. Why is this a life worth saving in light of the horrible act that he has committed ×2?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about earlier how the jury only deliberated 2 hours in this case. We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, I want to get your thoughts on that. Is that any kind of predictor, for how they will decide on the death penalty case, in the death penalty sentence, right? Because the trial stretched out over a couple of weeks, and they made their decisions pretty quickly.
I'm glad I'm not...
We're going to take a quick break, and I want to get your thoughts on that when we come right back. So stay right there, Gary, and stay right there to our viewers. So there we heard it, Rachel Hendricks, one of the surviving victims of this shooting, talking about the shots ringing out, talking about being grazed in the leg as she hid behind a closet door. Certainly some very riveting testimony there about how she and Lamar Dubberly managed to escape the house. In fact, I think we have some surveillance video showing them as they fled the house. So I do want to show that if we have it. Gary Gerstenfield and I have been talking about the sentencing phase, which is going to begin on Friday, and whether or not we'll hear from these same witnesses. Let's see, is this the video of the 2 of them? Yep, yeah, you can see, wow, she's running pretty quickly there, and that was Lamar, okay. And Rachel comes next, and yeah, I mean, she's been grazed, shot in the leg. Who knows, what her physical state is. They were lucky because they managed to escape. What I'm wondering, Gary, in your opinion, is when the prosecution seeks the death penalty in a case like this, how much does what the victims want play a role in whether or not they ask for the death penalty? There was another case we were covering a few weeks ago when a murder victim, actually before she died, had said herself she did not want her killer to get the death penalty. Now, the prosecutor still pursued the death penalty. Does it matter what the victims want in a case like this?
It depends on the jurisdiction, I guess, and maybe it depends on the specific elected prosecutor. In my experience in Florida, probably no. And this is a case where, while we have 2 dead victims, clearly, if James Colley had gotten his way, there'd be 4, which, makes his situation even more dire.
Yeah. Well, let's hear from from the other surviving victim right now, Lamar Dubberly. He was dating Amanda at the time of this, and perhaps James was looking for Lamar when he showed up angry with his gun at the house that day. Let's hear how he described some of the terrifying moments inside the house. Okay, so that was some more of Lamar Dubberly's testimony. He was Amanda Colley's boyfriend at the time of this shooting. Gary is still with me via Skype. Gary Gerstenfield, criminal defense attorney. Thanks for all of your analysis on this today. As we've been saying, the penalty phase is going to begin on Friday when both sides present their case as to why or why not James Colley should or should not get the death penalty. So we know in the closing arguments for the trial, the defense said that this should have amounted to second-degree murder. They basically said that Gary, his actions, not Gary, James's actions were the result of a depraved mind, not a planned, premeditated attack. What sort of mitigating factors do you think they're going to bring in during this penalty phase? We know they already said he was on a lot of medications and feeling very depressed.
Well, they're going to show that he had some emotional problems. They're going to bring in psychological reports. They should have an expert testifying. I would expect to have at least one or two experts testify about his mental condition, state of mind, and that sort of thing. So we're going to see that. It'll be an impassioned part on him. He's going to, I think, have to take the stand at this point if he's going to try to get his life spared. And so he's going to have to get on the stand. He's going to have to testify. And that's going to be very, very interesting to watch.
Yeah, I mean, we did hear from some of his family members in the trial, and we'll probably hear from them again. If he does take the stand, I mean, he'll be questioned, but will he essentially be pleading for his life?
Yeah, very much so. Absolutely. He's going to have to, you know, I mean, many jurisdictions are scaling back the death penalty. My joke of, you know, is Texas and Florida are trying to put an HOV lane. So, you know, he's got a challenge, no question about it, and his lawyers know that. I mean, this is going to be a fight for life for him and for his attorneys.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, a fight for life. Again, that sentencing, the penalty phase is going to get underway Friday morning. It will possibly continue into next week. Gary, stick around. We have another break coming up. When we come back, I think we're going to replay the verdict for those of you who may have missed it from earlier today. So stick around. That's coming up right after this short break. All right, well, there it was, the guilty verdicts against James Colley. As we heard those verdicts read, we just saw the back of Colley's face, so it was hard to detect his reaction or any emotion. But what we did not see was that loved ones of some of the victims were crying and very emotional as this verdict was read in the courtroom. Now, after the conviction, the state's attorney on this case came out and said the facts of the case are as callous and violent as any I have ever witnessed in my professional career. Went on to say the state will now move forward with seeking the death penalty against Colley. We have to remember it's really a tragic case here. Two people lost their lives, and there were two young mothers. Amanda Colley and James Colley had two children together. They have two children who are now in the custody of some of Amanda's relatives. They have a 7-year-old daughter and an 8-year-old son. So it really is a sad and tragic case, and people who knew the Colleys say they're just sad overall about this, while the family members of the victims are certainly pleased with the guilty verdict. A lot of people in the community feel this is just a tragic situation overall. So the penalty phase, as we've been talking about, will get started on Monday. Gary Gerstenfield, want to get your final thoughts. A little while back, we were talking about jury deliberations in the trial. They took 2 hours to convict him on all of these charges, these rather serious charges. Is that a predictor of anything for the penalty phase?
It depends on how strong the defense is able to come back and counter with their emotional plea and their argument in mitigation as to this capital murder convictions. I think what's going to weigh heavily in the minds of the jury is the fact that by putting him to death, they're making orphans of the two small children. That's going to be a difficult bite. And I think in looking at this case and trying to find some differences between this case and some of the others we've seen in Florida, that's probably James Colley's best argument. I don't know how he's going to try to make that argument, but that's the argument that I think I would be trying to push if I'm glad I'm not, but if I was on this defense team, that would be the argument I'd be making.
Yeah, I mean, certainly it's not like they were strangers from each other, right? They were partners and the parents of children. So that was my thought as well. What part is that going to play in this penalty phase? The fact that they have these two kids, we don't know what kind of relationship the kids now have with their father, but certainly if he gets the death penalty, I would imagine this only drags it out maybe even more for them, because we know how death penalty cases go: appeal, 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 pushed, and pushed. Your final thoughts on this and how you think it will all shake out next week?
I think it's going to be very interesting to watch. I think there's going to be a lot of passion on both sides. The prosecutor in this case feels very strongly that this is a death penalty case. As pointed out, this is, I think the words were, the most callous thing that she's ever prosecuted. And those are very powerful words coming from a seasoned prosecutor. So I expect to see a lot of passion on both sides. I expect to see a very well-tried case, because this is really what counts if James Colley is going to try to save his life.
Gary, thank you so much for all of your great analysis today. As always, we enjoyed having you with us. And thank you to our viewers for being with us. Have a great night. We'll see you back here first thing tomorrow.